Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
In just a matter of seconds, you're going to hear a classic episode of this show from back in the day when we called ourselves Movies We Like.
It took us a while to settle into the show's format, so you'll notice some differences as you listen to these episodes. For instance, it takes us a bit of time to actually get into the conversation about the movie. Things like that.
But we're still proud of the conversations about the movies themselves, and we think they're worth keeping in the library.
So enjoy these episodes from our back catalog. And you can become part of our Discord community, learn more about the show, and find out how you can become a supporting member at thenextreel.com.
So thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to The Next Reel. We appreciate your time and attention, and we hope you enjoy the show.
I really have to focus now.
You do, because it's like this is a test. It's
I know.
Like you're
I feel
being
like
tested.
I know. I feel like I'm walking into, an English class in high school and about to take a big test that I'm not ready for.
You said last week that you took your daughter to Star Wars.
I did,
and she fell asleep.
Mm-hmm.
I took my daughter to Star Wars today.
Oh, okay.
And I fell asleep. Sometime immediately after the pod races.
Well, those will put anybody to sleep, so that's understandable.
I fell asleep, and I woke up when my daughter is like elbowing me, saying, "Dad, I have a bloody nose," and she has blood like pouring out of her face.
Oh my goodness!
So we ran out and we got tissue and we cleaned it up, and she's holding her nose and she says, "Let's go back in." And we watched. We picked up at the Carmina Burana scene. And that was quite good. But I wanted to share just a few thoughts on, because you shared a lot last week. I just have a few additions to it.
Okay.
The best 3D, the most rewarding part of the 3D, the reason to make this 3D and the reason it worked for me was the opening title crawl. Which is sad, and yet it was exactly what I imagined it should look like floating in space. And then from that point forward, the 3D was totally useless. Did you get that? I mean, it was...
Well, I didn't think it was useless. Like during the battle scene at the end when, all the ships were flying around in space, that it just added a nice depth to it. It's
a nice yet nearly imperceptible depth. Like, that movie was so clean and so perfect when it was released, right? It looks so crisp and perfect on my television. It looks crisp and perfect. And I go to see it on the big screen. My expectation is that it will be crisp and perfect, especially because I just talked about last week. I talked about how I saw Ghost Rider, which was some of the most impeccable 3D that I have seen. Mm-hmm. And this one was fuzzy and distractingly artifact heavy and downright out of focus in some sequences. And I found myself really aggravated by that. I was frustrated the whole time. I was like, why did I give this dude more of my money? I'm really getting myself... And I do it willingly. It's like, please, stop, make me stop punching myself in the neck. I was getting really fired up.
Yeah, it's all the... just going back to old films and converting it. Because I've had the same experience on everything I've seen that's been an older film that's been converted to 3D, like The Lion King and this. It just, everything seems dark, and it doesn't seem to lend itself well to it.
Because check me on this. When you film something in 3D and convert to standard or to 2D, right? You're able to maintain the crispness of the sort of and the full range of color and the full range of sort of brightness and saturation, right?
Well, because all you're doing when you're filming in 3D
you're filming
with two cameras. So yeah, when you drop it to 2D, you just only show one camera's perspective,
right? And so the conversion. Do you know what the actual, like? Could you walk through in short strokes like what the conversion from 2D to 3D of an old movie? What do they do? I know nothing about it. What does the process look like?
Well, my understanding, which,
I'm sure awesome. Seriously.
I'm not an expert, so this is just my basic understanding. But essentially, they take a photograph, essentially a frame of film is like a photograph, right?
So I've heard this.
Right, exactly. Right. And there's just, 24 of these every second, blah, blah, blah. Right. So you take that, and it's what... it's rotoscoping, essentially, is what they do. So say you have, three characters, a building, and then in the distance you have, a fire or something. And the three characters are spread at different spaces across the foreground. So what they do is they basically cut them out. And that's, really what they do is they cut them out. And you just
create like multiple layers of film now.
Yeah, it's essentially kind of like the old school Disney, like what they did in their animation with the multiplane cameras. And now what you do is you have a frame of your film, but like one character is on the upper level, the next character is a little bit farther behind that one, the third character is farther behind that, then you have the frame of the house, and then far distant you have the fire, right? Whatever is burning in the back. And so you now guess as to how far all of these are from the camera, so that you're able to say, okay, that burning bush in the back is 500 yards away. The frame of the house is is 20 yards away, and then this person is 12 yards, this person is 6 yards, and this person is 4 yards away, and so they use some sort of mathematical thing, I'm sure, to kind of just create, okay, so if this person is 4 yards away, we're going to have to put the duplicate image in the other camera's eye this far, move him over to this bit. And so it's just kind of a process of cutting people out and moving them around so that
frame by frame by frame by frame.
Exactly. So it's a long and awful process, I'm sure. And then obviously if a film was done with a lot of CG like Star Wars, they
have to rebuild a lot of effects.
Well, or they can take the effects that they created, and they can just essentially process the entire thing of the effects through a different lens, which would be the 3D lens.
Right.
So in a sense, anything that's CG has the ability to become much more three-dimensional than the kind of cutout after thought that they do.
Right, and you could see that in, for example, Darth Maul's Sentinel droids, right?
Yeah.
He sends the 3 droids out into the community, and you can see when they come into frame, it feels like they come out and are floating out over the audience of the sort of the lower part of the theater, and that feels appropriate. That's like rich 3D, and those moments happened so few and far between in this film for me. Like, I expected to be blown out of my seat during the pod racing scene. Yeah. I expected to be blown out of my seat as during the final lightsaber battle. And I just didn't get it. It felt like I was, just throwing good money after bad. I was very frustrated by it.
I am sorry to hear that.
On that note, however, my daughter is really stoked to see Wrath of the Titans. Kind of wish that wasn't something she was excited about, but it's a big film.
And speaking of the films that were, converted after the fact, that the first one, Clash of the Titans, was shot 2D, but then, like many modern 3D films, it was as an afterthought, up-converted to 3D to make some extra cash.
Yeah.
And it was done really poorly, and that's a perfect example. Like, when I saw that, I could see, like, Perseus is on this level of the film, and
right.
It's just like, it just felt like a bunch of cutout. It felt like what are those called? Those little viewfinders that kids look through,
Huh. Yeah. The
Viewmaster. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. That's exactly what it feels like. But on that same note, I'm actually looking forward to Wrath of the Titans. It looks like one of those great big movies that's going to be a great sort of exemplar for cool effects. Like Ghost Rider was. I mean, it was gorgeous.
Yeah.
Even if you don't like Nick Cage, I mean, which I don't really, but I quite enjoyed the experience.
I enjoyed the first Ghost Rider more than I thought I would. I don't think I'd see it again, but I still enjoyed it more than I thought I would. And It's got a great score by Christopher Young. So
yeah, that's true. That's very true. You should definitely see this because this the second one, Spirit of Vengeance, it's a great action movie. It's awesome. He plays the actual Ghost Rider very differently than in the first one. Like, it's really twitchy and sort of schizophrenic, and like, I was fascinated by just how the actual sort of skeletal hero moves, and it was great. I quite enjoyed it. So Andy, did you see anything else this week that's worth talking about?
Yeah, I saw Margin Call.
Oh, what'd you think?
I loved it. I was just totally engrossed by it. I thought it was a fantastic film, and I definitely think it was worth the Oscar nomination for Best Original Screenplay. And Kevin Spacey, it was so refreshing to see him in a film where he wasn't just like, he's kind of almost become a cliche of himself as always just kind of like this, just douchebag, guy who's just rude to everybody and crass and just, always coming out with these, smarmy comments and stuff. And it was such a refreshing opportunity to see him playing kind of a reserved character who is still like in the middle of this huge. It's basically all takes place over about 28 hours or so of the company that essentially started the firewall sale of all the mortgages back in 2007.
Right. It's like the first 24 hours, like it's right, and has some really terrific performances from some really terrific actors who I never really expected seeing together. Right, Paul Bettany with Jeremy Irons, with Zachary Quinto. I mean,
Demi Moore.
Demi Moore. I have a major crush on Ashley Williams, and please, Asif Manvi.
Yeah,
I see that guy every night on the Daily Show. Well, not every night, but he's great.
Yeah, it was for a first film by J.C. Chandor. I was just blown away. I was really, really pleasantly surprised by it.
That's great. I'm glad you saw that movie. What was that? That's all you caught this week?
Gosh, I feel like I've seen something else, but I'm just blanking right now. I started watching The Conversation again. I haven't. I passed out from a long day of skiing after I started after that, and I made it about halfway through.
Where do you go skiing in Phoenix?
You just drive up into the mountains. They're only a couple hours away.
There are no mountains there. Where do you go for mountains?
Where do you think the Grand Canyon is? It's up in the North Country.
Grand Canyon's a hole in the earth. You're just making stuff up now. Just making it up.
No, Flagstaff has a great ski hill, albeit very thin of snow this time of year.
Wow,
it was a little. It was still a good day, and it was my daughter's first time skiing, so it was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's fun. That's nice. You could do that. All right. Well, I didn't. Besides Se7en, I'm working my way through, which I had not seen, was the Lincoln Lawyer, which. I think I expected more. I guess I'm tired of Matthew McConaughey being a lawyer.
You know, I think I was expecting less from that film.
Really?
So I walked out of it enjoying it quite a bit. Well, I don't know. I just wasn't really expecting much. I guess I've grown to a point where I don't expect much from Matthew McConaughey. So when I saw him in a film that wasn't that bad, I was like, okay, there you go.
Have you heard anything, any word on whether or not they're going to, speaking of lawyer titles, whether anybody has optioned The Litigators? John Grisham's new book. I read that book this week, and it was a good read. It's a pulpy kind of lawyer read, but it was really good. There's a nice sort of dramatic twist to it. I like the characters he pulled together for this for this law firm. That it's an interesting twist of sort of watching the ambulance chasing kind of law firm turn into something reputable. And I felt good. I felt sort of rewarded at the end of it. And I don't usually feel that way about law stories.
Kind of like Denzel Washington in Philadelphia.
Yeah. Right. Man, I haven't seen that in so long.
It's been a while.
Anyway, it was a good read.
Cool.
And I'm working now on. Oh my goodness, it's an absolutely epic science fiction story. I can't think of the name of it. Well, it'll come to me.
A recent one?
No, well, it's one of those that I'm listening to it. I've got it through Audible, and it's one of those. It's like 6 parts that are 9 hours each. You know, I mean, it's this unbelievable epic, and there are 5 books of that length and girth in the in the series, and so I'm just trying to get through it, and but it's quite good. I'll think of it. It'll come to me. Anyway, we should talk about this movie.
Well, before we do,
do
you want to do your usual thing?
I do. I have a usual thing.
And do your usual thing, and then we have 2 new 5-star reviews on iTunes, so I'll read those after you're done.
Oh, I love that.
I know, isn't it great?
It's really great. So I wasn't actually ready, but I'm ready.
Well, okay.
No, I'm ready now. The usual thing is this: make sure if you're catching this on the website, we love that you have stopped by the website. You can listen to the show on the website anytime you want. That's very handy. You can also hear our show on Stitcher Smart Radio. It allows you to listen to your favorite shows directly from your iPhone, iPad, Android phone, Kindle Fire, and more on demand and on the go. You can download Stitcher for free at Stitcher.com or find it in the appropriate app stores for your chosen mobile ecosystem. Stitcher Smart Radio. It's the smarter way to listen to radio. You can also find us in the iTunes podcast directory. And when I'm looking at our data of where people come from, I look at where people are coming from to listen to the show. By far, people are still hitting us from iTunes. I wanted to share with you before we do that what countries people are listening to the show in.
Ooh.
And I would like to welcome each and every one of our international listeners. We have a very small population of listeners in the Russian Federation.
Oh, excellent.
Romania, Croatia, France. We start getting a little bit more interest in France and the European Union, and Spain and Denmark and Germany and Japan. Now, Argentina and Chile, it starts picking up. Ukraine, the Maldives, the Philippines. We now have more of a significant audience in the Philippines and the Netherlands. Greetings to all of our Netherlands listeners. Vietnam, the United Kingdom, and second to the United States, Mexico.
Wow.
Buenos dias. How do you say welcome to our podcast in Spanish?
Bienvenidos a nos podcast, I guess.
That was
if I recall any Spanish from my Spanish speaking days.
That was good. You sounded you sounded just like a foreigner speaking Spanish in a restaurant, authentically. And of course, all of our U.S. listeners, thank you so much for joining the show and listening to us, and for passing on word of the show to your movie-loving friends. We appreciate your help.
Yes, we do.
And what do people have to say in our in iTunes?
Well, we have Amy, spelled very cleverly Eighghmmie. Amy.
Nice.
Said, deep and insightful film banter. I have enjoyed the musings of Pete Wright on a number of different topics, but truly enjoy the Movies We Like podcast. The discussion always takes me back to the moments of the films which really caught my attention and made the lasting impressions. Wright and Nelson share new-to-me discoveries on the makings and behind the scenes, and also give me some morsels of goodness on perhaps why those film moments connected.
That's really nice.
Yeah. Oh, and then she says, highly recommend.
Oh,
So that is really nice.
Amy. Amy. That's really nice. Yeah, that's very kind of her to say. Who else do we have? Who else has written in?
You reminded me either of Nell or Forrest Gump when you said that.
Amy.
And then Mike Evans, good old Mike here in Surprise, said, feels like I am in the room with them.
That might not be a great compliment. It feels like I can't get out of a room that I'm stuck.
I'm clawing at the walls, but they won't let me leave. He says, I enjoy this podcast a lot. Even if they are talking about a movie I have seen a bunch of times and think I know everything about it, they seem to find things that I hadn't thought about. It makes me want to watch the movie again to see what I missed. For the older movies, it's like rediscovering the movie all over again. And for the newer ones, I find myself seeing films I may have not been inclined to. It's a benefit to see the movies before you listen to the podcast. If you do, you will get more out of it and feel like you are talking with the guys.
Man, that's so cool. What great. Amy and Mike, thank you so much for saying that. And I know, actually, both of Amy and Mike have also commented along with us on Facebook posts. And it's just very gratifying to hear that they're listening along. So a big shout out to Amy and Mike for keeping up with us.
Yes, thank you.
I think Mike was the one who actually, wasn't he the one who started pointing out the movies that he really he skipped the podcast because he really hated the movies? I hope he turned around.
I think that was Alex. Actually.
Oh, okay, good. All right. All right.
Yes, I believe he said, I can't remember which movie it was.
Well,
Benjamin Button, maybe.
yeah. No, that was a subject of hot protest. Let's talk about, as I like to call it, Se7en.
Se7en.
Se7en. Can we talk about this movie? Are you ready?
Talk about it. I am ready to talk about Seven now that we've been going on for about a half hour now.
This movie totally holds up.
It more than holds up. This movie is I think should be one of the perennial classics.
Absolute, hands down. I don't know. I don't really know how to talk about this movie in any context other than awesome. It is, okay. All right, I'm gonna slow down. I gotta slow down. I feel like I'm eating too fast. It's like I'm running out of oxygen in the office here. So, we have now watched all of the Fincher films, with the exception of Alien 3.
Correct.
We've watched them in reverse.
Mm-hmm.
What is your perception of this movie in the context of all the other now later movies in our Benjamin Button style Fincher quest? How does this movie compare now that you've seen all these other movies that have stacked up after it?
You know, I was wondering if we should talk about that beforehand or after, and I think we may as well talk about it now.
Well, I've totally screwed it up then.
No. I think it's great. It's good to bring it up. I think it's watching it in reverse was very interesting to kind of deconstruct, Fincher's career and see where he started with things and working with certain people and choices that he made and everything. And coming back to Seven, I have really found that he's a filmmaker who's certainly kind of, grown in the types of stories that he tells, but for all intents and purposes, I mean, coming out of the gate, he was already making amazing films. And so it's not like watching a filmmaker grow from kind of a low end, a B-rated movie up to, something stellar. I mean, he's been making stellar films from the beginning. This film, as soon as it was over again, I told my wife, I said, I might consider this a perfect film. I mean, it's so good. There's a few little problems I have with it, but
I really am looking forward to hearing what those problems are. I think for me, there is one problem with it, and that is it's not approachable enough to a broader audience.
Well, I think that is I guess that is a problem, but if you are a filmmaker and you're acknowledging your audience and you make a film with your audience in mind, knowing that this is a film that the audience I'm making it for will really connect to it. There are definitely going to be audiences that aren't going to like it. I know people who won't watch it because of the gore, and because it's just so dark and gloomy, but everyone else who I know who is fine watching that in a film thinks it's a fantastic film.
Well, true. And I say that really more personally because I find myself watching it. Kira would not watch it with me. And she swears up and down that I had forced her to watch it some time ago. And I don't remember that. But the point is it is such a well-architected film, and the performances from Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt so early in his career, are so pitch perfect in this film that I want more people to see it. I want to share it with more people, and I don't find that it. I find that there's such a audience of folks that are put off by the gore. That's disappointing to me. I want to share what really fine film work is modern auteur work is really all about.
Yeah.
You had been sharing some points in the Google Doc that I thought were pretty strong. In particular, as long as we're talking about early in David Fincher's career, can you share what you found out about Morgan Freeman's first perception of working with Fincher?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was listening to the commentary on the film on the DVD. I know they had different commentary when the Criterion Collection released the Laserdisc, which I actually have, although I did not have time to go through all of those commentaries. That would have been a lot of commentaries to go through. But yeah, Morgan Freeman was talking about David Fincher and, just kind of what it was like working with him. So let me just read this blurb. Let's see if I want to read the whole thing. Well, I'll just read the whole thing. I'd highlighted a portion, but I didn't read the whole thing. When I first met David Fincher, I was struck by his personality, his person. He's warm, he's got this great smile, and then you talk to him and his intelligence is almost intimidating. And he's explaining to me how he wants to shoot this. Nothing about character and all that stuff. That was just my area. But the technical aspects of this movie and how he wanted to approach it, I found it very intriguing, and I was looking forward to working with this guy. So I found myself immediately able to put myself in his hands because he's already told me about what he wants to do, the effect he wants to make, etc., etc. I now know this, so if he says he needs me to make an adjustment for the light, I won't cuss out the director of photography for making me play to the lights. My whole experience with David throughout the filming was one of almost symbiosis. I really took to him and admired him.
I find that passage so, I think the most important sort of frame for me around that is that this was a guy on his second major motion picture production.
After a really bad experience.
After a bad experience, exactly. At this movie, I think hearing a comment like that from an actor with such a CV as Morgan Freeman, you're just as likely to have seen that sort of a reaction to working with Fincher as, after Benjamin Button or after Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Like that's the kind of really expertise that he sort of just brings instinctively to working with actors, don't you think?
Yeah, oh yeah, I completely agree. He really knows how to communicate with the actors, knows how to communicate with all of the technical people he's working with, and he's also able to work with each of them so that they understand the other side. So that the actors, like he said here, Morgan Freeman knew exactly what Fincher was trying to do technically, so that he knew, the look that Fincher was going for with the film. So on the technical side, Morgan Freeman didn't mind moving his body, adjusting it for the light. Whereas if that hadn't been explained to him, like he said, he would have just, cussed out the director of photography. And, it's really interesting when you start getting to that place as a director and you're able to kind of make everybody work together so well. And like we just said, this is at the beginning of his career.
Okay, let's walk through the film a little bit. The script by Andrew Kevin Walker. How did the script come to Fincher? He was not originally slated to direct this one.
No, this film, I didn't really realize this until I was listening to these commentaries, but it was around for a little while. I think Andrew Kevin Walker wrote it late 80s, early 90s, I want to say. While he was living in New York, he was really depressed about, his attempts at becoming a screenwriter and everything. And New York just had this oppressive feeling on him that basically led him to write this story.
Yeah, I can feel that. That's
right.
That's a real. You ought to send that to the mayor afterward. This is. I spent some time in your city and just wanted to share with you the results.
Well, and it's funny because they never actually tell you what city the film takes place in. It definitely has that New York vibe, but it's never called out as New York. And it was actually shot in LA, which is very interesting considering how oppressive and rainy and dark and dirty the whole thing looks.
Right.
Yeah, very interesting. But he, so Andrew Kevin Walker, it started making its way around Hollywood, and a director, Jeremiah Chechik, was attached to direct it. He is not a director who's done a whole lot. I think his big credits would be National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, Benny and June. So it's odd that he was chosen. I think his American remake of the French film Diabolique is probably what
got his name on it. Yeah.
Yeah. But at the time, the studios, and I don't know how much a role Jeremiah was playing in this, or if it was just the studios, they really had Andrew turn it away from the kind of the gritty film that it is as we know it. They had him trying to turn it into more of a kind of a detective, chase film type of story, where at the end you've got this great big, this big chase scene where Somerset and Mills are on the trail of John Doe, and as I was reading here, they chase John Doe down into a manhole and through the sewers and up into this building that he sets on fire or something, and it just turned into a very cliche sort of Hollywood cop action movie. Luckily, that film did not get made. Something happened. I'm not quite sure what, but David Fincher, he was sent the script and looked at it, and he loved it. He thought it was just a brilliant script, and he everything about it from the beginning all the way through the head in the box at the end. He called his agent and was like, I have to make this. This is great. And this was, after Alien 3, it was reported that he didn't read a script for a year and a half, saying, I thought I'd rather die of colon cancer than do another movie. So I know he was really apparently turned off and was just happy at that point in his life doing nothing but commercials again. But his agent sent him this script. He read it, was just like thrilled at the chance to do something that really would stand out. And he called his agent and said, I want to make this. God, I can't believe, we could make this movie with his head in the box. And his manager or his agent was like, whoa, head in the box. Oh no, I sent you the wrong draft of the script. Here, let me send you let me send you the most recent draft. And he sent him the script, and it was the one that had like the stereotypical cop chase at the end and everything. And he's just like, what? No, this is not the film that I want to make. And so he told his agent that he would only do it if it was the original first script or first draft of the script that had the head in the box and the whole very heavy ending.
The way I understand it, also it was Brad Pitt had a role in that, saying he refused to make the film if the ending were changed.
Well, that was after.
Or was that later?
That was after Fincher came on, because then once Fincher was on and they were trying to make it, the studio was really, really pushing to change the ending. The whole idea of having a head in the box at the ending was just not something that they wanted to make. And so they wanted to change the ending to remove the head in the box, or like they wanted to put a dog's head in, I think, at one point. Like it was one of his dog's heads in the box.
Yeah. Not as good.
Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt, that's the point where they were just like, no way. It's not going to carry the weight. And to the point where Arnold Kopelson, one of the producers on the film, had to sit down with Fincher, and Fincher convinced him. He said, look, in 50 years, we want this to be a film that people are still going to be talking about. We want people to be, this is what we can do. We'll keep the head in the box. This is going to be, in 50 years, people will be still talking about it. They'll say, oh, what was that movie with the head in the box at the ending? That is going to be the moment in the film that people will still remember, and why it will be a film that is remembered. And he's right. It's true. And
there are so many of those moments in this movie. Yeah, almost every one of the sins is one that you remember.
But it's that twist at the end and it's not just the head in the box, but it's really what that head in the box represents and how it ends up tying all of those pieces, those final two sins, wrath and envy,
right?
How it ties all of that together, and it's so powerful. It really just.
It is powerful. Oh my goodness, it's powerful on so many. Visually, it's extremely powerful. That now check me on this. I don't think they actually show the head in the box.
No, they don't.
That's a very sort of wonderful Hitchcockian kind of a twist, given the amount of gore that they show in this movie. the amount of just sort of darkness and just a really disgusting setup for all of these different, the way all the different sins play out, to then not show the head in the box is, it's really rewarding. Like you end up really almost expecting it, and it's like a kick in the gut when you don't see it.
Well, and then you find out what it is.
Right.
You find out, but you almost couldn't show it because you want it to be a surprise. You want the audience to be thinking about what it is, so that when Somerset runs back and John Doe tells Mills, at that moment it's just like, whoa. John
Doe tells Mills. What's your perception of how he tells Mills?
I don't know. I mean, it works for me. It's the final piece, the final card that he has, that he plays and shows that this whole time he has been winning, and he knew it.
Yeah.
He had all the cards all the time. They were trying to beat him, but they were never ahead of him. They never had any idea how these last two deaths, Wrath and Envy, or last two victims, I guess I should say,
were going to come together.
Yeah.
That he was going to be one of the victims.
Yeah. It's really a powerful way to play that ending.
It was absolutely it was an absolutely wonderful twist. Let's see what else stands out. I had told you last week that I wanted you to talk a little bit about the way the technology of the film. Obviously this was long before digital.
Yeah, they still shot it on film, and Fincher, he had been really tired of films that took place in the dark that didn't look dark, where a black night didn't look black, but kind of looked like a muddy gray.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when film companies when distributors used to make film prints, they would put them on real thin film, on real thin emulsion, and so anything that was dark just had kind of this grayish look. So what he did in this film is he did a process called a bleach bypass process, where essentially after it runs through the I'm going to try to get this right. The film runs through the bath where it gets processed, and what happens is the silver gets stripped off of the negative, but what they do then is they run it back through, so the silver essentially kind of reattaches itself to the emulsion in the dark spots. And I don't quite understand the chemical reason for all of that, but somehow it ends up coming out where everything that's dark has a much deeper, darker look to it. And so it creates these really dark, contrasty films that are really just real moody. It just has a real moody look. And that's essentially how they shot it. And they only did this with, I don't know, a certain number, like 2,500 of the initial film prints that went out. After that, the rest of them weren't done that way. I think in the initial run, I saw in the initial opening night, and so I'm pretty sure I saw it in the silver nitrate version, and feeling like it was just this very dark, black film.
Mm-hmm. Can you think of other films that have used the same process?
I was looking at that, and the Game they used a similar process, but I don't think it was quite the same process. Let's see. It was first used actually in 1960 by a Japanese filmmaker, Kon Ichikawa, called Her Brother. That was the first time bleach bypass was used. It was actually, oh no, not that one. It was used in Roger Deakins' film 1984. That's pretty interesting.
Huh.
I did not know that. And in Saving Private Ryan, actually, There's a big recent one that was done.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. So the film, it really does look darker, and I think what I had read, the Criterion Collection, the most recent Criterion Collection, they actually went back to one of those Bleach Bypass 2500, and so you can get that look on the special edition DVD.
Well, which is actually an interesting thing about doing that process is you essentially every time you make a new version of it, like when Criterion did their version, and then when the studio did the version for the DVD, you can't just take another version. You essentially have to go through the process all over again. And so the DVD and Blu-ray that subsequently have come out in the last 12 years or so are actually going to have a potentially slightly different look than the Criterion Laserdisc version that came out in the 90s. So it's kind of an interesting thing. I think it would be interesting to look side by side at the different versions,
right, and see
how much it's actually changed.
Okay, so let's talk about our lead characters. Originally, it sounds like, let's see, there were a couple of interesting casting choices. Or casting, I think, would have been interesting casting choices. Hindsight is always what it is. But apparently the part of Brad Pitt was once considered for Denzel Washington, who turned it down.
Yeah.
Well, that would have been a whole different movie.
Yeah, it would have been. I could almost see Denzel Washington, not to put him down in any way, but I could almost have seen him in the more, cop chase oriented version.
Totally. Very different. But I think one of the things that Brad Pitt brings to it, and let's see, where does this, I need to go back and get the year for 12 Monkeys. When did 12 Monkeys come out?
It was the same year. This Brad Pitt actually was not available for some reshoots at the end, because he was actually off shooting 12 Monkeys. So these came out right on the
heels of one another.
Yep.
He brings that. There's a very strange sort of twitchiness that I think that sort of carries across between the two films. You can feel their proximity. They sort of bookend one another. Like the character in 12 Monkeys is what happens after the character goes through what he goes through in Se7en.
That's an interesting twist that I hadn't really thought of, but it's kind of funny. Yeah.
Don't you see it? I mean, it just feels like he's bringing that to it. There's a thing that he does in this movie that he's just constantly scratching the back of his head.
Yeah.
And I found myself wanting to itch something back there for him. It is just such a perfect sort of frustration. He's like a caged animal. He brings exactly what I expect of this new, how he considers himself as a seasoned police detective, having spent 5 years doing this sort of detective work, and yet he is still the newbie sort of beat detective compared to Morgan Freeman's 38-year veteran.
Yeah,
you think back to the sort of the buddy movies, right? That are the buddy movies that are fun to watch, the character development.
Yeah.
Right. And this one stands out to me because of the sophistication of these two actors and the way they bring their relationship together through the course of these horrific events. You see that, hey, it's nice to meet you. Get the hell out of my office. I'm the new guy. I'm here to take over. Turn into, these guys who really have a deep affection for one another. And by the end of the movie, there's that great Morgan Freeman, as he's talking with the chief, saying, whatever he needs, give him whatever he needs. And it's just it's a wonderful turn. And there's a point about 40 minutes into the movie, the two of them are talking to the chief in the office, and they're trying to come together on these killings, and they get the call that I guess it's the police commissioner. I can't remember. It's the police commissioner. Who is it who's giving the statement? And they stand together and say, this doesn't feel right. This isn't our guy. and you really realize that they are as one in this film finally, and that conversion, that transformation of these two characters from being, sort of artful opposites to a singular crime-fighting entity is really great.
Yeah, it is, and even to the point where at the end, or toward the end, as they're getting ready to go with John Doe out to find these last two bodies, you've got that very intimate scene where they're like shaving their chests together while they prepare to be taped up for the wireless, or for the microphones to be taped to their chests and everything. It does create this very intimate moment between the two guys where they really have grown together. Even though it's only over the course of a week, it does develop into a much more interesting relationship as it goes.
Well, and I think that's a really good point. The sort of space and time element, which is to say that one of the things that horrific events does that the act of experiencing a horrific event does to teams is bring them together, and and these two guys are certainly examples of that.
Yeah, definitely. Another interesting thing that I think works really well in this film is in relation to Brad Pitt is his relationship with Gwyneth Paltrow as his wife Tracy, and I think the fact that this was actually made at the time, if people remember back when Brad and Gwyneth were actually a couple, and I think that the affection that they have for each other in this film is a great reflection of the actual real life affection that they had for each other. And it comes across. I think it really comes across in the film, even though her on-screen time is very, very short.
Very short, but those moments are. She is a significant catalyst in the film, and it's interesting. There's a scene where she calls Somerset,
right,
and to have coffee, where she confides in him, saying that she is pregnant. And he is so beautifully clumsy in his ability to talk to women, and yet he does so really quite well. And you see her really break down, and yet she has been such a symbol of strength in her relationship with Brad Pitt's character, in bringing those two men together, to invite him over to dinner and to really cut through all the awkwardness that these guys were dealing with.
Well, and to really introduce them to each other as, David and William.
Yeah, exactly.
Up to that point, they didn't even know each other's first names.
Exactly.
Yeah, great moment.
It was a great moment. It was a great moment. One of the things I found interesting in this movie, and as long as we're, we look at the thread of sort of elements in the films of Fincher, is this idea of how he handles research, on-screen research.
Yeah.
There's a lot of on-screen research in his films, and this movie is no different. And at least I don't remember dealing with on-screen research in Alien 3. But this one, there is a lot of it there. Did you get any sense or do you have any sort of reflection on how this movie handles the use of sort of on-screen printed and photographic material compared to these other movies?
Well, you're right. I mean, he does do that. And I guess by nature it's a detective story. So they are going to detect, they're going to use their skills to do that. Just like, Daniel Craig's character does in Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. He is a, investigative journalist. He's investigating. Mm-hmm. But the way he does it is very fascinating. And a lot of it stems from the story itself. You have this serial killer who, for all intents and purposes, has really done his research and is a very, very smart cookie. He has read all these books, which is obviously how they track him down in the film. He's read all these books. He's read, Dante's Inferno. He's read the Marquis de Sade or the Marquis de Sade, as
Marquis de Sade exactly.
brilliantly eloquates. But it's very he's somebody who has done his homework. And Somerset likewise is somebody who knows how to research. And I think for me, the scene in the library always stands out as a fantastic moment where you really get to see a very smart man use the tools that are handy to him to kind of dig deeper into what this serial killer is trying to say and is doing. And the way that it's shot, the way that scene is done with that Bach piece playing in the background.
Which it correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the same piece that is playing when James Bond wakes up in the undersea lair of one of my Spy Who Loved Me.
Is it?
I think it's the same piece. I'm going to have to research that, but it's one of my favorite scenes when he says, "Oh, Mr. Bond, here are my sharks." Okay, go ahead. You were saying.
That was just a genius comparison. I loved it.
Well, let me just interject, because one of the reasons that I like this so much is and I think is a really artful way to inject sort of interactivity into the scene. There is a sequence where Somerset is, he's doing all this research. He's doing it off time, right? He's not really on the case. He's off the case at this point, right? He's doing, but he is. We see these pictures of all this classic, the classic sort of Renaissance cuttings of the Seven Deadly Sins, and he's making notes to Mills saying, you may want to check out such and such in the Catechism and such and the Seven Sins and Seven Deadly Sins, etc. He's making notes, and it cuts back to Mills doing his own investigation, which is essentially an update of the Seven Deadly Sins printings that Somerset was looking at. It's the actual photographs of John Doe's work,
right.
and having it cut between the two characters doing their own research interjects a real sort of momentum to the sequence that makes it it makes it not sort of get bogged down in just information vomit.
Right.
I interrupted you with my James Bond thing a while ago, so now finish your point.
But you're absolutely right. That's exactly why it works so well. Is you have these intercuttings of these things. You the way that it cuts to him looking through these books and photocopying the pages, and you see these wonderfully awful images of the layers of hell, and all the different Renaissance paintings that we look at and everything, and then the actual crime scene photos, which really have a kind of a quality of that fascinating horror that you see in crime scene photos, where I don't know, they always end up black and white for some reason, but just the nature of the crimes just is so horrific, and then the way that it's depicted in black and white just seems so matter of fact yet awful, and it kind of the way that a lot of the art was, it has that same sort of quality. So it's a really fascinating way to get across the research as they look at it all.
I have in my notes something it's like a mea culpa. I brought up during when we were talking about I guess it was Panic Room, that I really loved. It was Panic Room and Fight Club that I really loved the way he did on-screen titles. And I had brought up, when I brought it up, it was about credits. And you came back immediately, said, "Are you kidding? The best credits in Fincher that Fincher does is from Seven." And so I wanted to give you a chance to talk about your impression of the credits sequence, because it's another one of the sort of legendary Fincher credits. I feel like we should stack and just do a show reviewing only credit sequences of his films.
Yeah, you easily could. It's really, I mean, I very distinctly remember watching this film in the theater, and those credits started, and I just was like already like knocked back in my seat, just going, I am in for an amazing experience here.
What
And
of note, the credits don't happen at the beginning of the movie. Right?
No. Right. Yeah. The very first thing you see is
it's a crime scene.
Yeah. You see a crime scene with Somerset while he's investigating a domestic, violence that turned into murder scene. Very quiet, very, laid back, very interesting scene, the way it plays. Yeah. And then it jumps into the credits.
So,
which essentially are the introduction to John Doe for the audience, because we're essentially watching John Doe's creation of these fascinating and horrifying journals of his that are just full of scribbles of like the rantings of a madman in a lot of respects, along with really horrifying and unique photos and sketches, but the way that it's cut together and the film is layered, and you see just really unique editing styles going on through the whole thing. It just was a real unique experience to watch the opening credits for this film. And I know that I can't remember the man who did the opening credits, but he definitely had some influence by Stan Brakhage, who is a very famous avant-garde filmmaker who I actually had a class with back in college. Mm-hmm. Very interesting filmmaker who really saw film as an art form where you're essentially painting with the camera, you're painting with each frame, and he took that to the point where he literally was painting on his frames and everything, scratching. He would scratch in the negatives, and he would just do all of this very unique, visceral work with his films that he made. And a lot of that influence came through in the opening credit sequence here. Just
so, are you saying? I mean, you bring up the scratching. The titles, were they actually scratched on the negative?
They weren't. They weren't scratched.
Not here.
On the negative. Okay. But they have that sense of having been scratched on the negative, and they got that from. And I'm not going to remember the term, but usually when they're doing titles, there's a specific kind of camera or something that they use that essentially pins the image down, and essentially, so when they're layering it with the titles on top of it, it will always be in the exact same spot. And Fincher was just like, well, why should we have to do that? And their reaction was, of course, well, because that's how we always do titles. Mm-hmm. And he's just like, no, let's try it without. It just feels like the film where you shouldn't do that. And so that kind of creates that real jittery, shaky way that each title comes up, mm-hmm. which does really lend it to that feeling of having been scratched into the negative.
What the titles are telling a sort of a sub story in Seven. It is we're watching John Doe cut his fingerprints off of his fingers. He's cutting the skin off of his fingers and affixing them into these journals that he's written. Interestingly, about the journals, this is a bit of trivia that just it sort of blew me away. That in fact, all of the books that they discover in John Doe's apartment and the books that we see him sewing his skin into and writing in were all real and written for the film, taking 2 months. $15,000, and every one of these binders was full of the scribbles of sort of the quote John Doe, which I thought was fascinating. So that story we're seeing, and that the tidbits of well, there are no fingerprints in the crime scene. Keep looking. There are no fingerprints in his apartment. Keep looking. In fact, there were no fingerprints anywhere because he kept cutting his fingerprints off of his hands.
Yeah.
But then to document them by sewing them into the journals, yet another sort of slap in the face to the detectives that he was always 7 steps ahead of them, so to speak.
Yeah. And like they say in the film, John Doe by choice.
Yeah, John Doe by choice. John Doe and the 7th victim.
Yeah.
By choice. Closing comments, Andrew. How do you characterize it? I feel like we need some sort of a requiem.
Well,
do you have candles lit there?
I have been surrounded by candles.
By candles and herbs.
Yes, and I'm sitting in my my meditative yoga pose.
I'm about to eat my ceremonial turducken.
This film was essentially, I guess, discounting Alien 3, which I think in a large extent was kind of a not a good first step for David Fincher. This one really, in a way, may have started off David Fincher as a filmmaker who can essentially get what they call director's cut, where he gets to, make the film that he wants to make. And I think that his argument that he had with Arnold Kopelson about keeping the head in the box really proves his intellect at being able to be a director who gets director's cut by being able to sell them on the reason why those sorts of things are important and why the film should be made that way. And from the beginning, he's been able to sell his team on his vision and keep the film going. And they may not have called it director's cut all the way through, his early career. I'm not sure at what point they actually said, he's got final cut. But for all intents and purposes, it really feels like this film was the start of that.
It really does. And I think, back to the, I want to go back to another passage that you picked up and highlighted in your notes, which is, do you have that open still? Can you share his, there were thoughts on his role versus actor's role. And I think his perception of his role is, really illustrates why he's a guy who has earned the right to dictate how his films ultimately play out. Can you share that?
Yeah. So David Fincher, talking about actors, he says the actor's job is to be selfish of their character. They're the experts on who they are, on what they're trying to do. My job, my expertise is how it fits into the whole. And if you start to mutate what they're bringing to the table so that it only serves the narrative, then you're bereft of characterization. And characterization, life is what happens while you're making other plans. Life, that thing that makes the tapestry, it's the rough edges. It's the thing that makes an audience relate to it on a human level. It's a juggling act.
I think that's such a fascinating statement as we're talking about, him finding something defensible in the head in the box. Mm-hmm. That, in fact, it's the weight of the head in the box that as an audience are relating to at a human level. And the weight of a dog in the box just wouldn't have carried.
No, it wouldn't have. It would have, it would have been a very kind of flat ending.
Yeah.
There
is nothing flat about this movie. That's a great thing to say about it. There is absolutely nothing flat.
Oh, I was going to tell you. You asked, and I'm going to have to tell you now about the moment that I think is as perfect as a film as I think this is. There's one thing that I'm never quite sure of, mm-hmm. and it's a really, really minor complaint, but it's been something that it's always like, okay, I'm not sold on it. It's the strange attitude, the relationship that the SWAT guys have with the detectives, and it only comes up twice in the film, all in the scene, the sloth scene, and the first time it's the two detectives are walking up as the big let's go get the bad guy, or the ride to the bad guy's house is happening, which turns out to be a red herring, as it's really just a chase to find another victim. Mm-hmm. But as the two detectives are walking up the stairs, one of the SWAT guy runs by and says, "Hey, SWAT's before dicks," and he runs past them, to go up and, be ahead of them, basically. And then John C. McGinley, a fantastic actor,
in a fairly small role.
Very small role in this film. But as he's looking at Sloth, which at this point everybody thinks is a dead body, they say something, and I should have written down what the detectives say, but he kind of whispers back to them, "You get what you deserve." Like this, there's this weird attitude between these two departments within the police force. And then, of course, Sloth wakes up and everything.
Right, as he's screaming, "Dicks, Dicks,
yeah,
Dicks,"
right.
For the detectives.
So, but it's a weird little, thing that, it doesn't bother me that much. It's just a weird relationship thing that I don't think ever was developed that well. I guess, by nature in a police force, different departments are going to have attitudes toward each other and stuff. And, that's, I guess, the one, the thing in this film that stands out to me is just not as developed as I would have liked it to have been.
I find that really interesting. That's one that didn't, that's one that slipped by me. I thought that was I thought that was an interesting bit of sort of police force classism.
It is.
And or the sort of a caste system that exists in this kind of microculture. And I'd be interested to hear just sort of how real or not that is.
Right. Because by the end of it, there's no attitude at all, as, they're flying around in the helicopter over the two detectives.
Exactly.
So it's
that's a good point. That caste system is not, maybe it's just because of their sort of portraying the professionalism of the force in a very intense sort of high octane scene.
Mm-hmm.
But that also may go to your complaint that it was not a fully developed angle.
Yeah. Let me ask you one more question about your thoughts on the film.
Yeah.
The original ending of the film happened after Mills shot Doe, and then you cut to a shot overhead of the helicopter, flying down, and you hear him saying, "Somebody call somebody, somebody call somebody," and then it would just fade to black, and that was the original ending of the film. What do you think of the ending as it is now, where it fades back up? We see Mills in the back of the police cruiser getting ready to be taken in. Somerset has the conversation with the police captain saying, "I'll be around," kind of hinting that, he's not quitting now. And then there's the quote he has of Hemingway. What do you think of that ending?
The voiceover bit?
Yeah, the whole thing, like Brad Pitt, we see him in the car. We, see Morgan Freeman saying he's, essentially not quitting. He's going to be around. And then the Hemingway quote.
Wow, I feel like that's a loaded question. I'm trying to figure out how I'm supposed to answer it. My initial reaction is I found it, all right, maybe this is telling. When I remember the ending, like you tell me what you think about the ending, what sticks out to me is the gang style angle of Brad Pitt firing his gun at camera 6 or 7 times, right? Sort of POV of John Doe.
Yeah.
And then they wander away. He wanders off from the scene from the point of view of the helicopter. Mm-hmm. Then we're at where we've got lights going in the dark, and the captain's talking to Morgan Freeman, and they say, get him whatever he needs, I'll be around, right?
Right. And
I had forgotten that the Hemingway quote was even part of it.
Yeah.
To me, the end of the movie ended. So I guess that's pretty telling. One of the things that sticks out at me more than anything else is that it's as iconic as the silhouette of Indiana Jones putting on the fedora is Morgan Freeman's character turning sort of screen left over his shoulder when he says, "I'll be around." He's got his hat on, and it's that just sort of beautiful copper tone to the screen, and you see him say that in the rain, and it's just actually, I'm not sure that it's actually raining, but it's just that Humphrey Bogart moment, that and I guess deep down I wanted it to be the punctuation on the film. I'm not sure. I guess I'm not crazy about the Hemingway. And
Well, but even before the Hemingway, I mean, the filmmakers, like, well, Fincher, none of them wanted to add that ending on, but it was received very poorly in test screenings. And the studio wanted a little aftermath scene kind of tacked on to the ending.
you're saying the wandering off in the desert was received poorly in test screenings.
Yeah, like we'd cut to the helicopter shot overhead as we hear, the SWAT team saying, "Somebody call somebody, somebody call somebody." Fade to black, roll credits.
Right.
The test screening did really poorly. The audience was livid, and the studio felt they needed to tack on an aftermath ending. Nobody wanted to do it, but the studio required it, so they did. I personally have never had a problem with it. Like moments like you said with Freeman looking over his shoulder saying, "I'll be around." I mean, it's a great moment,
Well, and you know what I like so much about it is that it shows again. It absolutely fits in the dramatic context of the film. We go through this whole thing where we see these two partners, and in the larger context of the police force, we see that these horrifying events over the course of the week have brought them together, and we watched what happens when one of their own falls apart. And the end of this film says, you know what, this was really bad, but we're not going to fall apart anymore.
Yeah.
That's it was left to me as really horrific as the movie is, and what you see, the impact of what you see is so sort of stunning. The end is sort of an uplifting ending.
In a way, yeah, it is, because Morgan Freeman's not going to retire. He wants to stay there. Be strong.
It's like he's strong for the transition. You kind of get the sense that, he's not going anywhere because he knows the importance of the role. He knows the importance of his job, and he's going to stay until things are together. Yeah. And that's a powerful statement. And it's all wrapped up in those words, those I'll be around.
Yeah.
I think it's great. I actually, the more I talk about it, the more I like it. I still am not crazy about the quote.
I don't mind the quote. I mean, it's there. I don't think it's as memorable for me as, scenes where Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt are talking in the bar about apathy, or where Morgan Freeman and Gwyneth Paltrow are talking about loving their baby, and just those
spoiling
moments,
the baby.
Yeah, those moments stand out to me as the big, powerful, emotional moments. That quote at the end really, I mean, I don't think they needed it, but I do like the rest of the ending as it is.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
This movie, more than I think any other of the early Fincher films, man, this one holds up so well for me. It was, this is as good as they get.
And we've gone through all of these now, and I keep saying every time, I'm like, this one might have been my favorite. This one might have been my favorite. I don't know. I'm back to Se7en now, maybe being on top of all of them for me.
Which I think is so funny, because we started out, both of us, when we started with Dragon Tattoo, talking about how excited we were to finally get to Se7en, eventually to get to Se7en. And now we've done it, and I think it was absolutely predictive of the quality of this film.
Yeah. It's just a stunning film. It's so well made, and it's just such a unique way to tell a story like this that is not something you've seen before. I don't think there was anything wrong with it.
No, I really don't. That's good. So what are we going to do next week? Have we figured it out?
We may just have to leave everyone hanging.
Here at The Next Reel, we've been passionately discussing movies week after week since 2011. That's a lot of movies and a lot of conversation.
Sure is, Pete, and to be honest, it's a lot of work too, but it's work that we love. If you have been enjoying our show, we'd like to remind you that there are ways to support us, even if you're not able to become a member just yet. You might have heard us talk about our new watch page, where we've listed every movie that we've talked about, paired with Amazon or Apple links to rent or buy the movie.
Now we'd like to introduce you to our originals page. Let's take a trip down memory lane, Andy. Do you remember what the first film we discussed on The Next Reel was that was an adaptation?
Well, let's see. It wasn't obviously our Indiana Jones series because those were all original. Then we did Charlie Kaufman. Oh, of course. It was adaptation from Susan Orlean's Orchid Thief.
Exactly. We have covered quite a few adaptations over the years, and now we're providing a way for our listeners to delve into the original source material.
That's right. Just head over to thenextreel.com/originals, and you can see the list of all the adaptations that we have discussed.
From our David Fincher series, featuring The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Social Network, Zodiac, Benjamin Button, and Fight Club.
To our Paranoia trilogy with The Parallax View and All the President's Men, we have covered a variety of adaptations.
Those were some great discussions, especially Fight Club. And let's not forget our baseball series with The Natural and Field of Dreams, adapted from Shoeless Joe.
And Up in the Air and Thank You for Smoking. So many memorable conversations.
Absolutely. And you know what's exciting? Each purchase you make through our links doesn't cost you any extra, but a percentage goes to support The Next Reel and our family of shows.
You can support us while diving deeper into these fantastic stories, whether it's the paper, audiobook, or Kindle version.
We've also included plays and movies. If they were the source, we've put it on there.
So what are you waiting for? Head to thenextreel.com/originals, support The Next Reel, and get your next great read today.
I'm off to reread Fight Club. Now, where did I put my Kindle?